Hey, this is Greg Berger, and you are listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
Hello and welcome to episode 248 of the Cinema Geeks. I am one of your Cinema Geeks, Optimus Solo, and joining me as usual is the Comic Concierge. Hello, Dan.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. We're back at it again for more Western fun in our Western retrospective. This is the last in our 3-film block that we called Overlooked Westerns. We've already covered some John Ford, some spaghetti westerns, some remakes versus originals, and this is the end of our Overlooked section where we covered McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Johnny Guitar, and now today, The Naked Spur from 1953. We went in reverse chronological order at this time, from the 71 to 54
Switch
to
it up
52.
a bit, I
like
guess.
it.
Yeah.
That's okay because it's leading us back towards the classics, which is going to be another classics block next. So I guess it all makes sense. So,
True.
Dan, remind people. I know we talked about it at the end of that last episode, but just in case they didn't listen, remind people of what your history was with the Naked Spur going into this, and we'll kind of lay the groundwork before we get into the facts.
Well, it'll be quick because I had none. I honestly never even heard of this movie before we started doing this, and just looking up films to select. And this was one that was brought up as we wanted to do not just the obvious ones, but maybe some off the beaten path. And this one was named a lot as one of the more underrated, which is why it's in this section. So tried to stay as blind as possible going in. I just knew Jimmy Stewart was in it. Didn't really know the story. Didn't really know who directed it. So, yeah, I was. This was as fresh as a movie from 1953 movie experience could be for me. How about yourself?
It was the same situation. I knew nothing about it until I pulled up the poster and saw that Jimmy Stewart was in it, and that's about all I knew going into it. So I had this is one of the other ones too. Like, there's been some other blind spots that I haven't had experience with or didn't really know much, but the name,
Yeah.
or the title, or the poster, or like a famous line or something about, like, I don't even know if I'd ever heard of this film before we started doing research
I did
about
not.
which ones to cover. Like, this was as blind of a blind spot. Like, this is the definition of blind spot. Like, that's
Yeah.
the only way I can think about it. So, it'd be intrigued then to see what your take is on it. But before we get to our opinions, as usual, we're going to let Dan lay some groundwork and give us some facts about the Naked Spur from 1953, and then we'll come back after watching it and give you guys our thoughts.
As the 20th century poet Stone Cold Steve Austin once said, DTA, don't trust anybody, as this week we continue our Western retrospective with a look at The Naked Spur. The film follows Howard Kemp, a hardened former rancher who has lost everything after the Civil War, but is determined to rebuild his life by claiming the $5,000 bounty on a wanted murderer, Ben Vandergoat. Deep in the Colorado Rockies, Kemp tracks down the charming but manipulative outlaw who is also traveling with a young woman named Lena Patch. Realizing he cannot transport the dangerous fugitive alone, Kemp reluctantly joins forces with two unlikely companions, Jesse Tate, a disgraced Union soldier, hoping to restore his honor, and Roy Anderson, a grizzled prospector, eager to share on the reward. As the group makes the difficult journey through the rugged mountain wilderness, the trip becomes less about reaching civilization and more about surviving each other. Ben uses psychological manipulation to turn the bounty hunters against one another, exploiting their greed, fears, and personal regrets. This fragile alliance begins to fracture as suspicion, betrayal, and violence escalate. Kemp gradually reveals that his obsession with the bounty stems from losing his ranch and fiancée after the war. It left him emotionally isolated and consumed by his bitterness. During the journey, though, Lena begins to see beyond that rough exterior, while Kemp slowly learns to trust someone again. The story builds to a tense final showdown high in the mountains where Ben makes one last attempt to manipulate those around him into killing one another. Kemp ultimately defeats the outlaw, but the experiences change him. Rather than remaining consumed by revenge and financial desperation, he chooses a future built on hope and companionship with Lena, suggesting that the emotional redemption is worth more than the bounty that first motivated him. This was actually the fourth collaboration between director Anthony Mann and Jimmy Stewart. Rather than accepting his usual salary, Stewart negotiated a deal for a percentage of the film's profits. It was an unusual arrangement in the early 50s, but proved to be lucrative after the film was a success. Stewart did it earlier with the contract for Winchester 73, and it changed the way major stars negotiated with studios for decades later. Unlike many westerns of the era, this was not shot on studio backlots, but rather on location in the Colorado Rockies, which made for a difficult shoot for both crew and the cast. You may be wondering, why exactly is the movie called The Naked Spur? Well, it is a phrase that refers to a barren ridge on a mountain, which is fitting for much of the story, but also a fitting metaphor for Kemp's emotional state. Despite that, studio executives weren't so keen on the name, worried that audiences wouldn't understand the metaphor or worried that they didn't realize it was a Western phrase. Mann insisted on keeping the name, and it ended up being the right choice. It was both a success financially and critically, earning around $4 million, but also earning an Academy Award nomination for Best Screenplay, which was not common for Westerns at the time. But what do Kevin and I think? Are we fans of it like those original critics, or does it not stand up to the test of time? Back to us to discuss.
All right, thanks, Dan, for the facts there on The Naked Spur. As we talked about, we had not heard much about this, and it's obviously one of those films that doesn't get mentioned as often as Shane or High Noon or even like The Searchers or Stagecoach and things of that nature. Yet many Western fans do hold it in extremely high regard. It has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, Dan, do you think it deserves to be talked about more? Or do you think it's rightly so that this one's kind of been left unmentioned for the likes of some of those other big name films? What was your take on the first watch of The Naked Spur?
I definitely think it deserves to be talked about more. Like going into this, I didn't know much about it. Like our only thing I had back in my mind was, seeing Jimmy Stewart when we watched the way back when we started doing this in the John Ford section, when we watched The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Um, so I had that performance in the back of my mind, and so I'm like, Jimmy Stewart as an actual Western star, and I know he's done a bunch, which I haven't watched. So, but I was intrigued. And one thing I kept actually thinking back to was something like the original 310 to Yuma, in the sense of
Mhm.
it's both are generally a pretty simple story. This one we see a bunch of individuals who kind of come together by means that they weren't expecting to transport this prisoner to another location for the hopes of reward money. And that's the story there pretty much. So there isn't like plot wise, it's pretty straightforward, but what makes it intriguing is just like the way it looks at the psyche of man, the greed, the seeing people get manipulated along the way. I mean, it has 5 actors, and that's it. Like, it's just 5 individuals. There's no extras outside of maybe the horses and stuntmen. And in a way, like this, like I never watched like Gunsmoke or any of those classic TV shows, but it feels like it could have been like an episode of that, like where they, not in a bad way, that it felt like it was TV level, but it was kind of generally episodic. It was a general story that was pretty basic in its execution. Like even like when I say direction wise, I don't, when we looked at some of these previous films that were so well made, this was, this wasn't necessarily poorly made. It's not, but it's not like, to me, on the level of something like we've watched with John Ford or something of that nature. But I thought overall what made it work was the cast. Was it with it only being these 5 individuals, seeing them play off of each other pretty well, and then like the mind games that happen. James Stewart, of course, is James Stewart, but Robert Ryan really, I think, was the linchpin. Like he was almost like the, like the Joker that wanted to get caught in some ways, and seeing him try to play the games of different individuals and the back and forth between him and James Stewart, who you don't know much about, and you learn more. You learn more and more about that. Like maybe he isn't such an upstanding individual. So I didn't enjoy like how it was plotted and how it kind of played with your expectations a bit. So I do think it definitely deserves to be talked about more, discussed more. Very much agree that is underrated in the sense of the fact that like I knew nothing about it, and I do think it needs more more attention in that reign. Is it up there as one of the best westerns we've done in this retrospective? I don't necessarily think so. More so to go back to some of those elements where I wasn't necessarily wowed by the direction or anything like that, but I think it was effective at what it was attempting to do, and I'm glad I watched it. And I do think it's one of those I would. It's almost like an entry western because it's so it's easy to get into. It's it's very new user friendly in that way. But what were your thoughts on it?
So this is I've mentioned a couple times that I was just curious, so I had asked ChatGPT to rank the ones that we were going to watch the rest of the way. This was before we added some of them, but it originally in this block, it thought that I would not like McCabe and Mrs. Miller. It thought I would not like the Quiet Spur, the
Naked
Johnny
Spur.
Guitar
We're
that
trying to get
much.
to, okay.
Yeah, and it thought that it thought that Naked Spur would easily be my favorite, and I get why it thinks that. It does check a lot of like my boxes when it comes to like typically stuff that I go for, right? Like very limited cast. We have 5 people. That's it. Like that usually works for me because it usually forces the movie to be much more of an exploration of those characters and their arcs and their motivations and like the psychology of things. Like it generally tends to go there, and like I generally like a limited set film, right? Like something that doesn't have to be all grand and things of that nature, where it kind of hones in on things like we've talked about with some of the other ones, like you said, the original 310 to Yuma definitely came to mind a number of times, where we have specifically two individuals in that one that are really like feeling each other out when it comes to the mental gymnastics of what's going on, and I feel like we obviously get that here with Jimmy Stewart and Robert Ryan's characters. Uh, so I think like it has a couple of those things going for it. I think like some of the stuff that maybe didn't work as much for me on the rewatches of some of the modern ones that we watched, where it becomes very Hollywood style, where it's big and bold and grand, and there's a lot more action and like set pieces and things like that. Like I like the fact that this doesn't have all of that. So it like checks a lot of the boxes that usually make a film work for me. And I was generally surprised that this film doesn't get talked about more when a lot of the classic westerns get listed off, and it's usually not one that I see mentioned as much, obviously, like we talked about. So I am surprised a little bit about that. But I do think there was aspects of this one that just didn't quite hit me or go quite far enough to like wow me in some respects. Not that it's trying to like necessarily wow you, but there was something missing, I felt. I don't know if it's something missing or if it just didn't quite have like the chutzpah to like get me 100% like all about it. Like I enjoyed my time with it. I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad we added it to the series. I think there are some definitely good parts about it. I really enjoyed Millard Mitchell as Jesse Tate. Like I thought that character was decently fun to watch throughout the whole thing. He almost like holds it all together, I guess, for the crew. And so I do think it has its moments. I do think it has its things that we can talk about that are positives. I Does it reach the level of the original 310 to Yuma, even though it has a lot of similar things to it? No, I think I would take the original 310 to Yuma over this, almost every single time. And I don't know. I'm left wondering why it just didn't quite reach that level for me. But overall, I was generally entertained and enjoyed my time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we're pretty lockstep with this in the sense I think if there was one thing I thought it was missing compared to 310 to Yuma, like 310 to Yuma had so much tension, and I felt like you had this really complex moral question at the center of it, what it means to be a man, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there were like some elements of that with James Stewart's character because obviously like he gives up his farm to like someone he's going to marry, and how that all doesn't work, and him trying to overcome that issue. But I don't think it necessarily had the intensity there in some instances. Like
Right.
it didn't feel like at any moment this could explode, and I can't really put my finger on like what exactly that is because it had ingredients there, of course. Like you have the this best convict couple that could do clearly have many ideas in their back pocket of what they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to do. But I guess in a way, it felt like maybe it was just a bit. It didn't have that fear that like this in the sense of like I enjoyed, like he was charismatic, and he like I liked seeing him like play off the other actors, but he didn't have that element of fear to that character where you felt like these individuals
Mm-hmm.
were scared that he might wake up one night and slit their throat, like, and maybe then that's necessarily not what the direction they were going, which is fine. I think in the sense what you lost because his character almost felt a bit he like in the sense of he was just hoping things would go wrong. Like he had a few things he was trying to do, but he didn't feel like someone that was an ever fully in control. He was just trying to hope he would get it. I think that's where that intensity never really fully kicked in, and we had some instances, maybe like you mentioned, with like at the end, especially when we see what happens with Mitchell's character and how he kind of falls for what he's going after and like the tragedy that happens there. I thought that was well done. But as we're going on this adventure, I never felt like at a moment like okay, like things could explode at any time. So like it was entertaining, but like you said, if you're comparing it to some of the best things we've done, I think that was the one thing it was missing for me.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I know that you have throughout this Western retrospective made a few uh, wrestling analogies, so to speak.
One or two. I
And
try to think of one for this, but I kind of come up with one. You
so
got one?
so based on our conversation so far, this is I guess what I'm going with, and I don't know if it's going to be as good of an analogy as you've used before, and it might be something that puts me definitely in the minority, or I don't know, maybe it's a hot take, as the kids say. Do they still say that these days, or am I already too
I
old
don't
where that's not a thing anymore? Anyways, like to me, this is like the wrestler that has the body and has the technical skill and has all of the pieces of being like a good wrestler, but is just missing that it factor. Like
know.
it's missing something that like makes people excited for their matches. And part of me really feels that it's because of our main two characters. Like I think
Yeah,
part of my problem is Robert Ryan and Jimmy Stewart.
really.
And I know that's weird to say because I know Jimmy Stewart's like held in very high regard. And I like him in a lot of things. I don't know if I liked him in this one though. Like I feel like this is the NWO if Horace Hogan and
Oh, where's Hogan? That
Ed
guy?
Ed
Yeah.
Norton or Scott Norton were like the two main leads on the NWO. Like I don't think that works, right? Like you needed Holland Nash or Hogan, like the regular Hogan, not Horace Hogan. So like I'm not trying to compare Jimmy Stewart to like that level, but like
Yeah.
I was struggling at the beginning. Like I literally had to stop and look up Jimmy Stewart's filmography because I was somehow convinced that this was like his first film,
Oh
even
wow.
though it's not even close. Like, and it's
No.
I'm not saying he was like bad, but like he didn't feel like I felt like he felt so much more at ease in his character in The Man That Shot Liberty Valance. And I know he doesn't play like a lot of these dark, morally complicated pseudo villain anti-hero roles, maybe. I don't know. I'm not an expert at his filmography by any means, but something about it, and it might not even be him. It might just be like him in this setting, in this story, or against these other actors. But I thought that I much preferred Janet Leigh and Ralph Meeker and Millard Mitchell, who are arguably the three lesser build characters or actors in this film.
Mhm.
And I felt like for some reason the main two there, Jimmy Stewart and I've already forgot his name. I like him so much. The main villain,
Robert
Vandegaard,
Ryan.
I think is it. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
Robert Ryan. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I felt like those two just didn't quite work as well for me. And I don't know, maybe you disagree and maybe you really like Jimmy Stewart, but I liked the other three characters better than Vandergroat and Kemp.
Victor. I didn't have an issue with Stewart's performance. Like I know he's done like he did other things with the director, like
Mhm,
Westchester 73 was another one. So I'd be interested in seeing like how his character is different in that. But I thought what Stewart's really good at is is like his reaction to things, like how he acts within a scene, especially like going back to the beginning. He does feel a bit off. He does feel a bit like he's hiding something because he is hiding something. He's always,
yeah,
I think he's supposed to feel a bit uncomfortable because he doesn't really belong in this situation. He's just a guy who is a farmhand. I mean, he's got some experience, of course, because he's a soldier, and perhaps relying on that. But I think he's out of his wheelhouse within much of the situation, and I think he's trying to play a part rather than be a part. And I think I
mhm.
get that in Stewart's performance,
Do you
especially
think
early
John
on.
Wayne could have played that part better?
Not this part. I think he wouldn't be able
No?
to.
I'm trying to think of someone we watched. I'm trying to like recast him, but I don't know who from any of the other films
Uh,
that we've watched that I would recast him with. Like, do you
I think
think like
no.
go ahead.
I think the reason why John Wayne wouldn't work is because like he can't be the real deal, and I don't know like if John Wayne can ever do that where he's
Mhm.
playing like where you're supposed to be able to see the facade. I feel
What
like
about like Robert Redford or like Paul Newman or I
well,
don't know. I'm trying to
they
think of
could Paul Newman, Robert Redford could Paul Newman could do anything. So he's like my favorite American actor ever.
Okay, gotcha.
So I would say yes, he could certainly do it. But they obviously they were like in
Yeah.
I think well, I mean they started Newman started not that long after
Could
this. Like
Cary Grant have done this? I'm just kidding.
you know what, like has Cary Grant done a Western? I don't think
I
so,
don't
right?
think he did. No, none that I saw.
But
I didn't see
I
all of
thought,
them. I did see 48 of
yeah.
them, but
Which is kind of crazy when you think about it, but
yeah,
considering how big westerns were at the time and his
I guess he
career,
was just
and
too cool for that. I don't know.
I guess so. I guess it was like doing the equivalent of doing a Marvel movie. Some people didn't, some people didn't.
Right. He couldn't do James
But
Bond. He probably wasn't up for westerns either.
yeah, but yeah, I guess I never had, and to me, it was Jimmy Stewart being Jimmy Stewart, so I never
Mhm.
necessarily it didn't feel off to me in that way. Uh, but and I liked Robert Ryan. Like I guess in the sense of I thought he played a good foil and he seemed like he was having a good time. But like I said, I think the one element that was missing from his character was that the element of menace. Uh,
Yeah.
and not that I hadn't like Janet Leigh was good. Like I do think the one area where it was weak was like Janet Leigh and James Stewart. I guess going back to our review of
He's not a
Vertigo
ladies'
and how we
man.
thought like yeah, like I their connection to me didn't feel very strong, and like considering how
I think it's true in
Val,
the but I think it's true in Philadelphia Story too. Did we have that same
yeah,
comment?
I believe so. So it just I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it doesn't connect that well. Luckily with some other things, it didn't necessarily matter as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. To me, he felt like a Jimmy Stewart doing his role. I do. If there are some scenes that didn't fully work, it's more so when we see some of his like dream sequence, not dream sequences, but he's waking up and like clearly dealing with like PTSD of, at a time when that wasn't really a term, but he's dealing with like bad dreams from what happened in the war and he reacted to those I felt like weren't super effective. They felt a bit over the top per se to bring us back to the last film we talked about, but in general I thought he was pretty good.
Okay. I was wondering, did you notice that there was no costume changes by
i
any of the characters in
i
the entire film?
i, I know know with the Naked Spur, one thing we talked about was like how that I know one thing I noticed a lot with the Naked Spur was that there was elements where you can tell it was on location and then it would go back to be more on set, and that was a bit more jarring. Felt like it was pretty much, for the most part, always on location. Like, how did that impact you at all? Like, feeling like you were
It
in the locations
it
in general,
did.
like the journey element of this, in the sense of, unlike and it's a different type of journey because we've done a lot of desert movies, and this one
Yes.
was more in the forest than was the desert.
Well, it was I think it was in the Rockies, and so we got, like, a
Yeah,
little bit of mountainous and some trees and foresty areas, valleys and or not valleys, but, like, that type of thing, and I thought that was good. Like, obviously, man has a much different take than, like, the John Ford, where John Ford does a lot of, Monument Valley and deserts, and you
yeah,
could I read somewhere that, like, man was specifically trying to give more of, like, he called it a Daniel Boone atmosphere,
yeah.
where he had
And
more of that, and I thought it helped in this regard because the story here needed elements that were gonna help with tension,
mm,
and I know that there can be some tension when you're crossing the desert because you got no water and stuff like that, but, like, from a danger standpoint, you have much more when there's falling rocks and you're climbing on cliff-like structures
mm,
and, like, doing all of this back and forth, and you can't see what's coming around the corner and things of that nature, and you also have horses involved and things like that, so I think not only did it add a little bit of tension that would otherwise have been, like, sorely missing, I think it was just fun to see another side of the quote unquote West. Like,
yeah.
the West is not just deserts, right? Like, so I thought it was an interesting take and I appreciated that. And I definitely noticed that. And I thought, from I don't know, I guess a cinematography or like a shooting standpoint, it helped mm, paint the picture of this world for me. What did you think?
Yeah, I think it led to a lot of, like, interesting shots too, like, we didn't mention, like, when you had the Indians, the American Indians, like, kind of scoping them out and utilizing how they would utilize the mountains in the sense of being able to, like, see them in the distance, and, it was very different in how, like, uh, they had to traverse the land because, we couldn't just it wasn't always, like, a singular location. You had you had all these, and how they also, like, we had that kind of the poetic start with him on top of that, like, rocky terrain, and then we end in a very similar situation, early parkour with them climbing up the hill, and then, and the follow-up to it as well. So I thought it utilized the setting well, and both, like, how it prolonged the plot as well as how it kinda set up some action sequences, and, if it gave you a good idea of location of, like, what they were trying to accomplish, and, like, something to overcome because, you had to go up this hill, and, like, you had with rocks going down. So it was a good variety of different threats that were, like you mentioned, that wasn't always just the same thing of, like, we're running out of food or running out of water, which after a while, those stories can get a bit tedious.
Yeah. I'm curious too. I know you talked a little bit about not feeling quite as tense as some of the other films that we've watched, even though like it is trying to go for some of that. Like I'm curious when it comes to some of the psychology, because it obviously is a big part of this with only 5 people. And it almost sets it up right from the beginning where our Vandergroat character, I'm just gonna say that name as many times as I can during the rest of this podcast.
Good
He has
name.
a
It's a good
conver
guy.
and his first name is just Ben, like, that's the best part about that.
Yeah.
But he's having a conversation with Howard Kemp, Jimmy Stewart's character, at the very beginning, and he kind of alludes, I'm not gonna quote it, like, verbatim because I don't remember the exact words, but he basically says something about, like, "This is a long trip," or something like, "I'm gonna have, more time to, like, mess with your guys' minds," basically, is kind of what he's
Yeah.
getting at. I don't remember exactly what he says, but he's basically like, "This is just the beginning, and now I'm gonna have all this time to, like, find a way to, like, not turning you against each other, but basically, like, find a way out of this." And so
Yeah.
it kind of sets the stage for that psychological, I don't know if warfare
True.
is probably too strong of a word, but we get a little of the fact that at different all of these characters, maybe with somewhat of the exception of Janet Leigh's character. I guess you can sort of lump her in too, but like all of the characters have a little bit of a moral gray area, right? Like
Mm.
maybe Vandergroat's not as much gray. He's a little bit more black and white on, but we're not sure at first, right? Like he's claiming that he's innocent and that he didn't kill this person, that basically Jimmy Stewart is trying to collect. I don't know if you said that in the facts, but Jimmy Stewart's the bounty hunter. He's trying to bring this murder to justice. He's
Yeah.
saying he didn't do it. So like he's trying to propose that there's a little bit of gray area. We do get Jimmy Stewart's character with the whole kind of greed or obsession of like getting him in so that he can right a wrong from his past, and there's a little bit of gray moral ground with him. And then we get the other two characters where one of them is more gray because we just don't know. Like Roy Anderson's Ralph Meeker character comes in kind of out of nowhere and is just like added to the group, and we're like,
Yeah.
can anybody trust this guy? Not that
Yeah.
he's necessarily done something or is accused of doing anything. We do see though his dishonorable discharge from the armed forces and things of that nature, so we kind of see that there's something there, but outside of that, we're not given any necessarily things that he is acting on too much. That, but he's kind of an unknown, so he's got a little bit of a gray area. And then we get Millard Mitchell, Jesse Tate, who doesn't come across as overly bad, but he is also motivated a little bit by greed in the fact that he's seen all these other people that he's come across that have struck gold or made a life out of him, and he's always the one that doesn't. So he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder to try to right that wrong. How did you feel like the psychological aspects between all of the characters and kind of the gray area that they're all playing in? Like, how did that either work or not work for you?
I thought that was the strength of the movie for sure, and I liked each character was very distinct. You had a good idea of what was driving them. They clearly were all individuals that had some sort of, like you mentioned, like no one felt like a white hat, like the classic white hat, black hat. We've mentioned how, in a lot of ways, people brought up how spaghetti westerns and how they made things a bit more complicated. I think what we're seeing here, especially as we're going back throughout a lot of these, that I think it's a false dichotomy of like what these westerns did. Because this one, I would think, like no one here is necessarily like a morally upstanding citizen. They all kind of
Mhm.
have their issues. They all are under false pretenses. Like James Stewart, his first big action is lying, right? Because he tears off
Mhm.
the thing of the poster for the reward, trying to get one over of everyone. So I think what was done well is that we see up front these are all flawed individuals. They all, their entire kind of foundation of getting together is somewhat built on a bit of a lie, a shaking foundation. And then you see Robert Ryan, and then him being well aware of that, and then trying to give him plenty of opportunity to take advantage of it. So I think in the sense of like that did get me invested and interested in the overall play and journey, because it's like, okay, you have plenty of things to take advantage of, and I can, you get why he wants to make this journey go on much longer, because they already don't trust each other. They already have clearly intentions to like they just want the money themselves. Like they have no trust for one another really. They're just hoping
Mhm.
that their shared interest will be enough. And then obviously with everything with like Roy Anderson and his loose connection to reality, and clearly he's like the every time we learn something new about an individual, although I think Jesse Tate's the one that we don't learn all that much about. It just shows that that clearly they're even worse than you thought in most ways. So I thought that was clearly to me the strength of the film, and how it used that, how it set up these characters pretty well. And although it didn't necessarily in the sense of like have that intensity per se, it was intriguing, and that's what got me invested.
I think too. I think it did a good job of not necessarily creating a bunch of like filler or just like things
Yeah,
that did like every conversation I felt like you were listening to because you're trying to learn more about somebody you don't know much about. So I feel
definitely.
like every line in every conversation you were kind of bought into like paying attention, and there wasn't really much wasted uh scenes or moments per se when it came to that. Do you think Roy Anderson's character could not read? Would Is that your reading of that he keeps handing Jimmy Stewart this paper that clearly says he's dishonorably discharged because he doesn't know that's what it says, or do you think
I
he
didn't
knows and
even
he
think about that, but
doesn't care?
I think that's a good reading of that scene. I didn't I took I did I took it more so like he was just showing it because hey, it shows that I was a soldier and that's what he cares about most. But him not being able to read, that actually adds an element to it that I was not thinking. So that's a I like that idea for sure.
Yeah, I was like, at first I didn't think that, but like I think it was like the second time that he handed it to him a second time, or he read it a second time, or unfolded it or something, and I was like, wait a second, like why is he so okay with just keeping like you would think that would be something somebody was holding tight or close to the vest, like you know what I mean? Like we've already
Yeah.
seen Howard Kemp cut off the bottom of the bounty poster. You'd think like Roy Anderson's character would have done the same for that. Like I'm just gonna like rip off that part that says dishonorably
Yeah.
discharged so nobody can see that. Apparently this was one of Sergio Leone's favorite westerns, and I think I can't remember which character, but I know he tried to cast one of these actors in a couple of his films, and I don't think he was able to. I don't know if it was Roy Anderson or which one, but he tried to get somebody involved because apparently this was one of his favorite westerns, which I thought was interesting. Are you surprised at all by that, or by the 100% Rotten Tomatoes score, or the fact that this was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, which didn't happen a whole lot for westerns? Are you more surprised that it got all of that type of stuff, but then ended up seemingly untalked, like not being discussed much when people talk about the best westerns?
I the screenplay thing I understand a bit. I mean, I have to go like look at that year and see like what was the I can't my knowledge of 1953 is not great.
Well, lucky for you, Dan, I am right here, and
Nice.
it was nominated amongst, here's the, let me find, best writing for screenplay. I don't know most of these films. Take the High Ground, The
Don't
Desert
know.
Rats, The Bandwagon, and then the winner that year was Titanic.
Wow, it went all the way back then too. So yeah, I don't think I know any of those. So maybe it just wasn't a strong year. I don't know.
The best picture for that year was From Here to Eternity, and then Julius Caesar, The Robe, Roman Holiday, and Shane.
Okay, well, I'm actually surprised Shane didn't get a nomination for best. Maybe it was adapted. I don't know. But this was a but I don't know. I think the script, like I said, was uh, one of the strengths of the overall film. So I
Mhm.
don't have an issue with that, or have. I do think it's interesting seeing it get those accolades, but like you mentioned, it doesn't get considering like Shane, for example, another western that came out the same year is one that I think gets referred to far more, and I think that's one
Mhm.
we're going to cover I think later. So I would be intrigued this one once ones we enjoy more. But yeah, I don't know what it's about, why that happened. Maybe just because James Stewart did so many westerns, and it is generally like scope of it isn't necessarily super grand, or like it's like we said, it's pretty simple, and that's in its simplicity. I think it's a feature, not a bug. I mean, it's only 90 minutes, and it makes well use of that 90 minutes. So I don't know. Maybe it just simply was also maybe because it's one that wasn't on TV, and sometimes that is a big
Yeah.
driver of what gets people's attention and has staying power. But I don't know. It's a good
Did
question.
well at the box office too. It made almost triple its budget when it came to that as well. So seemed like it was pretty well. It checks a lot of boxes for something that seemingly goes unmentioned. I do want to just say I didn't get to say a lot, but I did. He might not have been developed as much, but I did really like Jesse Tate's character. Like I thought
Yeah,
the fact that this guy's just like hanging out and like gives the guy directions on where this campfire was, and then just immediately becomes part of the gang, and it's just like
yeah,
the stuff that he's willing to do with these complete strangers. I would have been like, all right, I'll see you later.
yeah.
Like,
He does have that like father figure role, and you're like, yeah, and you know, he's got he's the most likable of the cast for sure.
yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it doesn't do him well, as it doesn't do a lot of folks in this
No,
film well. There's not too
which
many
yeah,
survivors.
which is probably why his fate is his fate, because he's the most likable. He makes the big mistake, and I do like his like I'm dead and I know it moment. He's like, oh well, this is I deserve. Like he was very he owned up
Yeah,
to it, so you give him credit for that at least.
there we go. Any final thoughts, Dan, on the Naked Spur from 1953?
No, like I mentioned, I do think it is like a good entry Western. Like especially if you're looking to get into Westerns of this era and like those 3 hour epics feel too much. I think this is a good watch. Like, I feel like this is a movie that, would back in the day would be on like on a Saturday afternoon, and you just kind of will get you lost in watching it on like TNT or something like that
Yeah.
back in the day. So I am intrigued, because like I mentioned, there's like Winchester 73 was another one that with a lot of the similar cast and crew. So I might check that out, seeing how it compares to this that came out like a couple years earlier. But
I think two
yeah,
things. I think it's a good, like you said, a good intro into westerns. I think this and like Stagecoach would probably be two that I would probably suggest to most people if they want to like watch some classics and like get familiar with like a lot of things that come on. I think too, like you could almost put this on a list of like Jimmy Stewart, like essential stuff. Like I know I wasn't as
yeah,
big of a fan on him, but like I feel like if you're trying to see some of his westerns, like I know there's other ones that he's been in, but it seems like, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and The Naked Spur should be like two of the ones you watch if you're trying to like get a feel for some of his westerns.
definitely.
So
Uh, yeah. All right. Do we want to talk about what we're getting into next week?
yeah, absolutely. So I'll let Dan go over the specifics, but we're basically entering a new. We covered some quote unquote classics, I guess, with the John Ford block with Stagecoach and The Searchers and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. But we're gonna do another look at some classic westerns, and we have 4 films kind of outlined for that. Dan, do you want to go through kind of what they are and what we're starting with?
Sure. And we mentioned one already with Shane, which came out the same year, and we're gonna this the next block we are gonna do earliest into latest. I don't know. We're kind of going kind of like
Yo-yo or something.
yeah, like a valley in time and back out again. But we're returning to other actors that we've seen. With next week, we're going to do Red River from 1948, which stars John Wayne, of course, who we've seen a few times within this retrospective, from True Grit to Stagecoach, when we started off of it. But any history with you in Red River?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I didn't even know John Wayne was in it.
Yeah. Well, spoiler alert there. So yeah, he is in it. And funny enough, we were talking before we started. I actually did watch this a few months ago because I was in a Western mood for some reason, but it's been a bit, so I'm looking forward to watching it again. But next, after that, another classic Western, and this one's exciting because it's only 85 minutes. I think it's the shortest film of the entire retrospective, from 1952, just a year before this film, High Noon, another classic. Any experience with that at all?
Nope. I've heard of it.
Nice. I watched it about over 13, 14 years ago, so it's been a long time. And then the aforementioned Shane will be the film after that.
I heard that one was one of the best pictures of the year it came out.
Yeah, I heard that recently as well. So, and then lastly, we'll finish up with Rio Bravo, which is one I have not seen. But how about yourself?
No,
Are
this is the
these
whole
all
block.
so
Yeah, the
block
whole
is all
block
new?
is blind spots, and
Perfect.
like the whole next block, except for one, is going to be so like I'm going through the next like 10 films, having seen one of them. I'm pretty sure, and then
Nice.
it'll change a little bit once we get to the other ones, and then we're going to get to a bunch that I've seen after that. So
Yeah.
it'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this section too because, like I mentioned, did watch Red River, and as I was watching it, I'm like, I actually wish this was part of the retrospective, and I'm like, oh
There
yeah,
we
we
go.
can do that. We have that power. So now it is. So
I love
we'll
it.
talk about that next week.
All right. So if you want to get some more Western talk, you can tune in to when we talk about Red River. You can also go back if you've missed any of the other ones, like we've talked about Stagecoach and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and the 310 to Yuma. I know we mentioned all those. So we have episodes on all those that you can go back and check out as well. If you're not a Western fan and you've listened this far, that's confusing. But we also have some counter programming going on for you where we're going to be taking a look through the Planet of the Apes franchise, all 10 films. I believe I have the right number there. So we're going to be going one by one through all of the Planet of the Apes films. And every once in a while, we throw a modern take of something we've seen or some looks at the films that are coming out this current calendar year. So just keep on the lookout for all of that type of stuff. You can pick and choose what you want to listen to for sure. But you can search out myself at Optimus Solo or Dan at the Comic Concierge, or you can search us at the Cinema Geeks or Cinema Geekcast. We also have our new Facebook page. So if you want to search that out, it's just Dan. What's the name on the Facebook page?
Cinema Geeks Podcast, I think is the
Cinema Geeks Podcast. So you can check that out, and we'll be posting some stuff on there. Well, that does it for this episode. Tune in next time for another chance to listen to more of the Cinema Geeks.